It was a crusade, namely a war of the cross and the bearers of the cross to conquer the infidel. And the goal was to take the holy place, the great holy place, namely the Holy Sepulchre, out of the hands of the infidel and restore it to the hands of the Christians. This was also not only a war of the church against the Muslims, but specifically a war of the Western church, not only against the Muslims, but to seize territories that used to belong to the Eastern church. But now they were going to get control of it. Because before the rise of Islam, who controlled the land of Israel? The Christian church of the East, the Byzantine Empire. Now the crusade was going to take these lands away from the Muslims and, of course, away from the Eastern Empire as well. So they were going to, in a way, surround the Greek Orthodox Empire, the Byzantine Empire. The other thing is that Normans went on the First Crusade. Now, in order to go from Europe to the Middle East, to Palestine, they had to sail from Geneva and other cities on the Mediterranean and from Venice. These cities were Italian. But what did the Italians do about the First Crusade? They said, well, we have ships, cost you $50 a person, we'll take you across. We have supplies. You're going to stay over for a while. The Italians in effect said, look, we'll hold your coat, you go fight. The Italian cities got rich on the First Crusade, wealthy. Many of them went because they had nothing better to do. Many of them went because they really believed they were going to go to heaven as a result of the crusade. And of course the rulers like Baudouin and Tancredi and the others, they were going to establish their territories. They were going to establish their own kingdoms. And several of them did. So they sailed and they did attack the Muslim forces in the Holy Land, and they conquered. They conquered Jerusalem and established the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1099, 3 years later. They conquered the city of Akko, which is just north of Haifa, and established the Crusader Kingdom of Akko. They conquered eventually the city of Antioch in Syria, which is a little more than 100 miles north of Israel, established the Crusader Kingdom of Antioch. They conquered a city in Syria called Edessa. So the Normans did establish individual private kingdoms in these areas. And of course, now that they had the Holy Land, and of course King Baudouin of Jerusalem had his kingdom of Jerusalem, and of course made it Christian, and they built buildings. By the way, some of the Crusader buildings are still standing. The Monastery of the Cross in Jerusalem was built by the Crusaders, 1099, it's still intact. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which had a church there, which was built in 350, and then probably another one. The Crusaders built another church on top of it. If you've been to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you'll see there are many different architectural forms, and they're intertwined, and they built one on top of another and joined them together. The Normans at that time, they were the aggressive force. They had large numbers of warriors. They had excellent military leadership. They were just the conquerors of the time. Before that time, of course, about 100 years before and even into the beginning of the Crusades, the Vikings were also a conquering area, but the Vikings never really conquered down into Europe. They went out in a great arc from Sweden down to Constantinople, establishing the first Russian cities, and going west in Iceland and Greenland, and then the Exo Meadows in Newfoundland, which couldn't last because they just didn't have enough to go. I mean, the whole story, the mystery. Why is it that the Vikings never established anything in North America? They were already here. Well, it's obvious why they didn't. How many Vikings came? 500, 1,000, 2,000? What did they have with them? What were their weapons? Swords, spears, lances, knives, bows, and arrows? What about the people who were living here, the natives? What did they have? They had swords, spears, and arrows, bows and arrows. But the point is, when it came down to the final moment, and the natives came down in 20 and 30,000, and these people were only 100, or well, let's say 1,000 maximum, obviously they wiped them out. So the Vikings didn't establish here, but they couldn't. They didn't have the weapons, they didn't have the numbers. They came in small numbers, and the natives came in large numbers. They had the same weapons. And you know, why they say it's a mystery, I don't understand. It's all written in the poetic Eddas of the Icelanders. And when you read the Eddas of the Icelanders, these poems, they tell you what happened. They say, the Skrælings came and they wiped us out. They call them Skrælings, the Mohawks or whatever they were. The point is that the Vikings had made their mark in establishing trade routes, but the Normans, who had also come down from the north, established themselves in France and in northern Europe, built a strong empire, conquered England, then conquered Sicily and southern Italy. Now they were on their way to establish themselves kingdoms in the Middle East, which they did to a small extent. However, there again, the Normans came and they established their control in certain areas, including Jerusalem and Akko and Edessa and Antioch, and a few other cities. But potentially, the Muslims were capable of organizing themselves, and eventually they did overcome them. But in the First Crusade, I suppose the Crusaders could say we were successful to a certain extent. So now they came and they established these Crusader kingdoms. By the way, when the Crusaders conquered Jerusalem, prior to the conquest, they had to storm the city. The city of Jerusalem was surrounded by a wall, and they were going to conquer Jerusalem, and they were going to throw flames into it. So Tancredi, one of the commanders, said to his general-in-chief, you know, there are Christians living in Jerusalem. And the answer was, yeah, but they're Greek Orthodox.
Yeah.
They burned them all. Jews, Muslims, Christians, all. Yeah. Yeah, the Catholics didn't like the Greek Orthodox.